Golden Sun: The Lost Age is the continuation of the first Golden Sun title. Golden Sun: The Broken Seal released on August 1st, 2001, and the sequel came out on June 28th of 2002. That's not even a full year apart from each other. It's been said before, but I'll say it here as well. These two games were originally meant to be one big game, but due to hardware limitations and time restraints, the team at Camelot had to split the game into two. However, this isn't like a Sonic and Knuckles situation where there's a definitive way to play the game. There's no lock-on technology here. What these games have in its place, however, is a form of data transfer. If you have a link cable, you'll be able to transfer your party's previous Jin, stats, and gear from the first game and into the second. However, if you don't have a link cable, then you're going to have to input a 6-page long series of random characters. Now, I'm not sure what they could have done to make this simpler, but Christ, this was always brutal. Thankfully, I already did this last year, so I don't have to worry about getting every single detail right. I just wanted to show it off for the sake of the video. Honestly, like looking back at Sonic 3 and Knuckles, it really is neat how Sega and Sonic Team at the time were able to have some sort of version of their vision. You know what I mean? Like, it's unorthodox, sure, but at the end of the day, you could play through Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles as one massive adventure. And I'm still over here just holding out hope that Nintendo and Camelot will revisit the Golden Sun franchise and remake these games as one huge adventure where after completing Isaac's adventure, the game will seamlessly transition to the adventure of the supposed antagonist, Felix. Now, I find that this game has a bit of a misconception around it. Like, I often hear people describe this game as from the perspective of the first game's antagonist, but the way how they frame the discussion makes it sound like as if we see the events of the first game through Felix's eyes, when in all actuality, we don't. See, back on the Sega Saturn, there was a game called Shining Force 3, and in Japan, this game was split into 3 parts. Part 1 was about the heroes of that story, and then Part 2 would be the events of Part 1, but from the perspective of the antagonist. So in that sense, you're seeing both sides of the same story, and I think that's a really cool idea, and it's unfortunate that these games never left Japan, aside from the first part. The Golden Sun games kind of expand on this idea a little bit, so rather than the events playing out from a new perspective, the story actually moves forward from this new perspective. Throughout the game, you're left wondering what the previous crew was up to, and when I was playing this game for the very first time, that's what had me hooked, like that's what had me keep playing. Now, how it actually handled these two parties meeting up? Well, we'll get there. The way how The Lost Age begins is very strange. Like, you boot up the game, you're greeted with the main menu with the game's title, then you get a recap of the events from the first game, and hey, you get a title screen. That's pretty cool. Then we see the ending of the first game through Jenna's perspective. We even get to play as her for a little bit, which is really cool. And then we pick up from where the first game left off in terms of its post-credits scene, and it's another title drop. Like, that's a bit excessive, but sure. If I'm honest, like, while I do think it's cool that we get to play as Jenna and we see more from Alex, you know, the supposed mastermind villain from the first game, this game's beginning is pretty rough. Like, the beginning of the first game, for me, is perfect. Like, there's danger, there's lives at stake, you know, we're introduced to the antagonist. Like, I was hooked. It was so well done. But here, we get to sit through a recap and watch people stand around talking about fucking life or whatever. You know, we do get a taste of what Alex is capable of, which is pretty cool, but I wouldn't get used to that if I were you. Honestly, the way how this game picks up is it's just a bunch of nonsense. Like, you go find a boat, you wait for Felix and Sheba to arrive, and then once the lighthouse is lit, the piece of land that you're on just kind of breaks off and drifts away from the continent from the first game. Then Felix and Sheba kind of wash up on shore, and everyone's happy and all, but then they get hit by a tidal wave that came out of nowhere, and they end up in a new continent, and that's how the game starts, everyone. Oh, boy. Now, with that said, it does pick up from here, and you're going to learn very quick what this game is really about and why Camelot had to split Golden Sun into 2 parts. The first game, while not linear per se, was tightly designed and focused. You get to explore 2 continents in total, and you get to see how they both connect. It was a very well-designed world map. But in The Lost Age, however, you get to explore, just about everywhere else. This game is massive, and what's neat is they can actually do quite a number of things out of the intended order. Oh man, and then later on in the game where you find the ship, like that's when you can explore the majority of the world, and then everything else just opens up. Like, The Lost Age genuinely feels like an open world game on the Game Boy Advance. What's more is that, much like in the first game, every town has its own culture or its own story going on. Like, we're going to talk about the actual plot of this game towards the end of the video, but it must be said that each of these towns feel distinct, and I enjoyed the stories that they tell. whether it was learning about how werewolves could exist in Weird, or sneaking around a village while a witch doctor performs a ceremony. Like, there's too many examples like this that live rent-free in my head. I've said it so many times before that I don't play Golden Sun for the plot, but it's the stories that are being told in the game, and these adventures that these characters go on, you know, that's where I find all of the charm, that's where I find all of the memorable story moments. Briggs is the best character in this game, by the way, and you can't prove me wrong. He's a pirate captain who gets arrested early on in the game, and he has a wife and child who live on a wrecked pirate ship. This guy, despite actually being a pretty challenging boss fight, is such a fucking dork, and I love him. Like, you can tell that he has no idea what he's doing, but he's just trying to do the best that he can for his family. And also, like, what he and his wife have is so perfect, and it makes my heart melt every time I play this game. Oh, I mean, what can I say? I'm a sucker for this kind of lovey-dovey bullshit, you know? And let's also not forget what they foreshadow with his son. You know, keep that in the back of your head for later. And by that I mean later. And by that I also mean, like, a lot later. So, yeah, just, you know, don't forget that. Oh, dude, and yeah, like, the way how he interacts with his grandma is the funniest thing ever. Like, he's such a mama's boy. Like, anytime that Briggs was on screen and he was involved with anything, those were the best parts of the game for me. Like, I was grinning from ear to ear whenever he showed up. One thing I really appreciate about this game is how it encourages you to play around with the class system. In the first game, you weren't ever really incentivized to leave your comfort zone, but that's actually not the case with this game. The battle and the Jin mechanics are largely the same, but when you start the game, you have in your party a Venus, Jupiter, and Mars adept, but you're going to find a few Mercury Jin that, by instinct, you feel like as if you might not be able to use. This is actually the game nudging you to try putting the Jin with different people just so you can see what you can do. And again, to be fair, there is a lot of depth here and a lot of really cool and really powerful signage at your disposal. You're even going to find these summon tablets that will award you with a new and powerful summon, but at the cost of multiple Jin from different elements. There's even a number of items that would change your class and grant you new abilities without even having to change your Jin. Like, this is all really cool and everything, don't get me wrong, but it didn't take long for me to snap back to what was comfortable for me. Now again, like, I know that makes me a scrub in the hardcore Golden Sun community, but I can't help it. Playing this way, it just makes the most sense to me. I'm sorry. In the previous game, there were 7 Jin of each element that you could find, but now each party member can hold up to 9 Jin, bumping the total number of Jin at your disposal at 72. There's so many new abilities and attacks that push the GBA to its limit. You know, and it needs to be said that while graphically it is consistent with the first game, but the new summons and weapon unleashes are bonkers in the Lost Age. The first game felt very much designed around the Jin and what they can do in battle, but in the Lost Age, this feels more designed around what kind of gear that you're using. There's a lot more weapons this time around with all sorts of different effects and elemental properties. There's even a forging system where you can bring materials found in chests or in the environments to get new gear. If you're going to tackle the endgame content, then you're going to have to really think about how you're gearing up your party. And if you're not giving Isaac the soul blade with his hyper boots, then you're doing it wrong. The hyper boots raise the chances of getting critical attacks, and with the right gear setup, you can unleash the Soul Blade's ability, Megiddo, I don't know, this thing where you throw the fucking sun at your enemies. You can do that like 90% of the time with the right gear, and it's fucking crazy. Also, on that note, fucking Excalibur, man. Oh, I just got a headache thinking about it. So Excalibur is like one of the rarest weapons in the game. If not, then it's the rarest. I mean, in my case, this has to be the fucking rarest. In my run anyway, it's the rarest and the most difficult weapon to find. It was not very fun. And the way how you get it is that you find Orhalcum either in the main story, or you find it in some of the optional dungeons and some of like the late game chest, and then you gotta take it to a blacksmith in Yalom. And then you gotta hope to God that you get the Excalibur, because you can get a number of different things. Like, you can get a rod, or a shield, but the majority of the time I got an axe, and I didn't want a stupid axe, I wanted my sword. And if you didn't get the sword, then you gotta reload your save state, or reload your official copy of the game. And you gotta give him the Orhalcum, watch him slowly walk up to his little table, leave Yalom, come back to Yalom, go back to the blacksmith, get an axe for like the 50th fucking time. This shit took me over an hour to do. But to be fair, its weapon unleash is pretty good, but its critical unleash is devastating and makes the final boss in this game a complete joke. I mean, it's a complete joke once you have like all the party members equipped with the Excaliburs, but I'm not doing that. I didn't do that for this playthrough. 1 was more than enough, and I really only did it to prove a point. And I'm not really proud of the fact that I did because I barely even fucking used it. So, you know, it just reminded me that, like, in my Wii U save, I got like 3 of those fucking things. How the fuck did I do that? I used to be patient. What happened? I didn't really think about it too much in the first game, but looking back, there were definitely a lot of chests that gave me things that I never really used, like oil drops or bramble seeds or antidotes. You know, a lot of one-use or consumable items. Like, there's still a lot of chests like that here in the Lost Stage, but now the potential of finding something really useful is much higher here, making it more tantalizing to explore every area to its fullest. Something else that's really cool is how later in the game, if you transfer your data anyways, you get your party from the first game back with all of the gear and Jin that you used from the previous game. Now, I'm not sure what happens if you don't transfer, because whenever I play through these games, I always transfer, so yeah, I don't know what happens. But with that being said, what's incredible about this is how at the start of every single turn, you can swap out one party member at a time to better fit your needs. On top of that, if your main party wipes out, your bench party will step up and continue the fight. You know, it's something that I praised about the first game, about how every member of your party pulled their weight and had value. You know, they each had a role or a function that was useful. And somehow, despite having twice as many characters, Camelot pulled it off again. Every single character, all 8 of your characters, feel like as if they have a purpose for being there. If you do actually transfer your data between the 2 games, you actually get to see these exclusive events, like bumping into the thieves from Vault or the warriors from Colosso. You know, like seeing these events play out, make it feel like as if these 2 games are part of one big adventure. And honestly, the gear that you get from these moments ain't too shabby either, so, you know, you got that for an incentive. When you get the party from the first game, the difficulty actually picks up quite a bit, especially if you decide to go after the multiple super bosses. Yeah, you know, the first game only had 1 super boss, but the Lost Stage has 4, and let me tell you, these fights don't hold anything back. Now, while I haven't played through the Lost Stage nearly as many times as the first game, you know, I still got a number of playthroughs under my belt, and each time I always went after these guys, and every time, even now, they still had me gripping my controller drenched in sweat. First of all, we got the Sentinel fight, which honestly, it isn't too bad. It's like a more challenging version of Deadbeard from the first game. So if you can manage Deadbeard, you can manage this guy. You know, he ain't too bad. Nothing to worry about. Valakar, however, like this fight was like pulling teeth. And to be fair, I did forget this guy's gimmick. So you know when you use the Jin in battles, they get put aside and get ready to be summoned? Well, this guy takes the Jin that you worked so hard to build up and then uses them against you. And it's like, you know, in the first game, you can get away with someone rushing a number of the fights. No, that's true. But Valakar takes that strategy and he uses it. It's like, wow, that's what it's like to be spammed by summons, huh? It ain't fun. Now I actually kind of feel bad for a number of the boss fights from the first game. He has this attack that sets aside a number of your party's Jin, but when he does that, it actually makes it easier for you to summon, so if you want to beat him at a quick time, you gotta be quick to bring out the summons before he does. The Star Magician wasn't too bad from my experience. Like, I've actually heard a number of people say that he's the hardest fight in the game, and while I could see why people would say that, this guy didn't give me too much trouble. Oh, sure, you know, he definitely has the potential to be really fucking annoying, but I never had too much of an issue. He has a number of orbs that he summons, and each one has a different effect. Where it gets tricky is when he brings up the orbs that can greatly heal him, significantly raise his defense, or deal out explosive damage. I found that if you look out for the problematic orbs and have like 2 party members gang up on them, you know, you should be fine. Like, this fight can drag out a little bit, but honestly, if you slip up, it can get pretty intense. What's really cool is that once we defeat the super bosses, you get new summons that are incredibly powerful, and the sprite work for these guys are insane. Like, when you look at these summons, just remember that this game came out not even a year after the first game. Camelot didn't have to go this hard, but they did, and they did it for us. And of course, how could I forget about the Dullahan, what I would consider to be the hardest fight in the game. Well, you wouldn't know by watching my footage, because ever since I discovered that you could cheese the fight by spamming endgame summons, that's just what I do. Like, this guy has so many attacks that hit like a truck, and he can even turn off the entire party's Jin, as in you can't use them to summon, and all your stats are lowered because all of their effects are gone. I will never forget my first time fighting this guy. It was like the worst thing ever, so fuck it, just spam those summons. Once you beat the Dullahan, you get Iris, the most powerful summon in the game, where she launches your enemies into the sun and fully restores your party. Again, 2 games, less than a year apart. Like, I can't help but be impressed. And I guess it is pretty pointless to get a summon this good once when you've already cleared the hardest challenge in the game, but at this point, you do it for bragging rights. That said, the super bosses aren't the only source of challenge that you'll find here. Like, I was shocked to find out that this game was a lot more difficult than I remembered. The last stage has some pretty sharp teeth to it. I found myself actually wiping out a few times. Like, it was kind of crazy. You know, it's also kind of refreshing in a way. Like, in the first game, while it was challenging at some points, it was pretty manageable. Like, you got punished if you slipped up, but if you played your cards right, you could be back on top, no problem. But this game, if you messed up, then you gotta bust your ass to get back in the game. Like, it could be stupid stressful, good lord. But man, like when you finally clear that fight that was giving you trouble, it is the best feeling, let me tell you. There's this point in the game where you have to fight Briggs and his gang of pirates early on in the game, and honestly, it gave me a lot of trouble, so I decided to put a pin in that fight to come back to it later, and I was able to clear some of the other optional dungeons and some of the dungeons that you need to clear throughout the main story, and then when I was able to come back, I was more than ready for round 2. What's even sweeter is that the dungeons in this game pack a bit of a punch too. Like, early in the game, they take ideas from the first game and build upon them in interesting ways, while they give you a plethora of new synergy abilities to play with. I'm talking about doing hyper-specific things like using your psychic abilities to tie a rope across a large gap, or to hover in midair, or how about drying up entire bodies of water, or causing explosions with your mind, or turning into sand. Like, the way how I see it, like, the more synergy they give you, the more weird and creative puzzles they add to the game, and I love this kind of stuff. Whether it was clearing debris from a wrecked pirate ship, or exploring one of the 2 lighthouses that you'll find in the game, like, there were many moments in this game where they put almost every single ability that you have to the test. Like, the puzzle design in this game gets my highest praise. And these dungeons, by the way, are pretty freaking massive, like, far larger than anything from the first game. I mean, shoot, just getting inside some of these dungeons could be a dungeon in itself, like, namely with the 4 elemental rocks. These massive mountains that you have to climb in order to make your way inside. And once when you get inside, you got a gargantuan dungeon just waiting to be explored. Out of the 4 dungeons right here, Gaia Rock was probably my favorite. Like, this one never felt as if it dragged on for too long, and has a pretty creative maze puzzle towards the end. What's neat about this one is how there's an actual story here. There's a dragon who lives inside the mountain, and he demands a sacrifice every year from the nearby village of Izumo. This time, a woman named Kushinada was selected to be the sacrifice, so her fiance, Susa, went into the mountain to slay the dragon to save his love. And that's kind of the whole point of this dungeon too. Like, you have to explore the inside of this mountain and shine these lights down into the dragon's lair to weaken the dragon, and once all the lights are lit, you can take him on. Well, actually, you can do this fight without weakening him, but I mean, I couldn't do it. Like, I tried. I didn't even find that out until this playthrough, and I got my ass handed to me, so that was kind of cool. Gaia Rock stands out because it's the only elemental rock that has any kind of story behind it at all, and it's even the only elemental rock with a boss at the end. One of the worst ones, however, you actually find pretty early on in the game, and it's Air's Rock. For me, for an early dungeon, this one is way too big, and there are way too many rooms that look the same, and it's way too easy to get lost in. So I enjoyed the majority of the dungeons in this game, and they all have great puzzles and have rich atmospheres and are much larger in scale and way more cinematic than anything that the first game had to offer. But unfortunately, there are a few things that hold them back pretty drastically, and this is the part of the video where your boy is going to bitch. For the most part, I've never really had a problem with random encounters in other RPGs. Like, I understand the frustration, but I find that there's more often than not ways to work around it. With games that don't use random encounters, I find that sometimes they'll lock you in a room and the only way you can progress is by clearing out all the enemies, or, you try to avoid enemies but they chase you down and, they're draining your health as you try to run away. Like, that shit could be really annoying. The first game had random encounters, but I never felt as if they got in the way. Like, it got a little heavy once when you got into the later dungeons like the Venus Lighthouse, but the dungeons were never long enough to where they became a problem. The last stage, however, makes me want to rip my hair out. The random encounters are brutal in this game, and when you're in a huge dungeon and every few seconds you have to stop what you're doing to fight some mooks, it gets really annoying. But what's worse is that it can get to a point where you bump into so many encounters that you get lost, and there's so many rooms that look the same, and you're just trying to figure out where to go, what to do, but you just keep getting bombarded with encounter after encounter after encounter. Like, there is an ability in this game that reduces the random encounter rate, but spoiler, it doesn't always work. And you know what's funny? Like, it just dawned on me during this playthrough, but in both of the GBA Golden Sun games, there's no in-game dungeon maps. I never even thought about it in the first games because the dungeons were short, sweet, and to the point. Like, it would have been appreciated, sure, and by all means, the first game should have one, but I never thought about it. Like, I felt like as if it didn't really need it. I just feel like as if it's a basic thing to have in your game if you're going to have dungeons, So by the time this game came around with its roided up dungeon design and its insane random encounters, I was losing my mind and always getting lost in some of these places. It was beyond frustrating. Oh, and you know what's funny? The Lost Age is this massive game with a lot to see and do. You have an entire world to explore, and every region is massive and filled with towns and secrets and optional dungeons. The world is begging you to explore it. and explore you shall, and you'll probably have a good time doing it too. Unless, of course, if you forgot something from the other side of the map, and then it dawns on you, you can't fast travel in this game. Well, that's not entirely true. You do get a teleport ability that lets you warp to the different villages that you've been in. The only problem is that you get this at the final dungeon of the game. Okay, this is something that should have been in the first game, yes, but again, the way how the world was designed in that game made it so that backtracking wasn't ever this huge issue. There was the trek from the Mercury Lighthouse to Tret, yeah, but that's as bad as it ever got. The Lost Stage has a number of moments where you have to backtrack, and it takes forever to get anything done, especially when you keep getting spammed with the random encounters. Now sure, at the end of the day, I would rather have it at the end of the game than not at all. It did help when I was trying to find the last few Jin that I missed, but there's no excuse when there have been so many other games, so many other RPGs that are considerably smaller and significantly older that have these fast travel systems, and then this one doesn't. Also, I don't know where I could fit this in, I'm just gonna say it here, but fuck Magma Rock. This place fucking sucks. Like, every 2 steps that you take, you get spammed with random encounters, and every room looks exactly the same. And despite the lava theme, it's designed like a fucking water dungeon. You raise and you lower the levels of magma in order to progress, and you also have to wait on these slow-moving platforms that go from one place to another just to progress, and I hate this dungeon. I genuinely hate this dungeon with all of my heart, and this is easily, without a doubt in my mind, the worst dungeon in the game, probably the worst in the series so far. At least the music's like really damn good though. The music goes hard. Okay, no, I'm gonna ride this game again. I don't even care. Like, the music in this game is sheer perfection. The sound quality is the same as the first game, so it does sound consistent, but this game has some of the greatest music you'll hear on the GBA that pushes its mono speaker to its limit. Okay, and I think we're actually nearing the end of the video, so now I'm going to talk about stuff that might be considered spoiler heavy, so if you do care about these kind of things, you can always skip to this time right here, and if you don't care, let's get into it. I'm actually pretty mixed on the story of The Lost Stage, I'm not gonna lie. Like, there's a lot of really cool ideas here and some interesting and honestly pretty heavy concepts, but there's also a lot of dumb shit. Now, first of all, we find out that apparently no one died on the day that Satoris and Minardi raided the Soul Sanctum. You know, Jenna's parents and Isaac's dad, you know, they all lived in this village way up in the north known as Prox, and apparently the 2 antagonists from the first game rescued them, including Felix, and actually took care of them up there. You can even tell that the people of Prox cared for Felix, you know, and it adds like a little bit more depth to Satoris and Minardi, and I think that's actually really cool. I don't like that the parents lived, you know, I think that takes away a lot of the weight and the motivation from the first game, and it comes off as cheap. But with that being said, having Felix be raised by the antagonists from the first game is pretty interesting. You know, it shows that while Satoris and Minardi were assholes, they weren't exactly evil per se. And we even get to learn why they wanted to light the 4 lighthouses to begin with. The village of Prox is dangerously close to freezing over, and the only thing that could save it is by lighting the Mars Lighthouse, which is directly north of the village. And when we approach the lighthouse, we see nothing but a pitch black void right at the edge of the world. This is actually something that we learned earlier in the game, like this is the game's twist. The power of alchemy was sealed away years ago in the elemental lighthouses because too many people were using its great power for greed and destruction. What they don't know, however, was that in doing so, they cut the planet off from its its life source. As a result, the world is now slowly but surely shrinking. The continents are getting smaller, and the edges of the world are clearly defined and visible. This was always the coolest thing for me whenever I would play the game. Like, seeing the edge of the world was unlike anything I'd seen before in a video game. So now there are many reasons as to why our party want to see the lighthouses be relit. Like, Felix and Jenna just want to help their parents, the people of Prox want what's best for their village, but more importantly, it's to stop the world from slowly dying. However, in the first game, we were told that if the lighthouses were lit, the power of alchemy will bring about the end of the world. So it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, and I honestly wasn't expecting that from a game like this, especially after coming off from the first game. I honestly think it's a genuinely good twist. How they treat this twist, however, left a lot to be desired. When I first beat Golden Sun, I thought they were building up to an Isaac versus Felix fight. Like, it seemed like the next logical step. And honestly, like, just think about it. Imagine transferring your save data from the first game with all the Jin and the gear and everything, bumping into the party from the first game at the Jupiter Lighthouse, and then having an epic clash. Like, it's the party that you've been building up with Felix versus the party that you've perfected from the first game, and the ultimate clash of ideals. But that's not what happens. I mean, I guess you could have something like that because this game actually does have a multiplayer mode, believe it or not. Like, I don't know what it's like because I've never played it, but I mean, I guess that's the closest thing you have. Instead, Isaac's party fell for a trap set up by Agatio and Karst, this game's antagonist, and are wiped out pretty quick. You know, some people say like, oh man, they make Isaac's party look like a little bitch because Isaac goes down so quick, but I'm like, look who he's paired with fucking Ivan. What do you expect? Then Felix's party fights against Agatio and Karst in an admittedly really cool and cinematic fight. Then we meet up with Isaac's party in a nearby village where they have a nice little chat. Like, literally, Isaac goes, well, why didn't you tell us you were trying to save the world? We would have totally helped you guys. Like, come on. That is so fucking lame. Also, Isaac is now talking in this game. Like, he actually speaks, which is weird considering how he was the silent protagonist from the first game. But now it's Felix's turn to play the part, and it's only sometimes, because for some reason he talks at the very last cutscene, which is pretty weird, and also there's at one point where he just goes, why? And what the fuck, man? Oh, what is this? I don't know, you guys. Like, I was really excited to play this game back in the day because I wanted to learn more about Felix, but the fact is, I didn't get to learn anything because he barely talks in this game, and honestly, that was a pretty huge disappointment for me. Another disappointment for me would be Alex and his lack of involvement in the story. He's in the beginning of the game acting all menacing, then he shows up halfway through the game to introduce Agatio and Karst, and then we see him climbing Mount Aleph at the very end of the game. See, once when all of the elemental lighthouses are lit, alchemy is unleashed and 4 beams of light make their way above Mount Aleph, forming what's known as the Golden Sun. Alex basks in its light, obtaining eternal life and limitless power, only to get bodied by the Wise One, which, I'm not gonna lie, was pretty satisfying to see because, honestly, I think Alex is pretty fucking lame. Fuck Alex, he deserves nothing. So, here's a hot take for you. You know Karst? I actually like Karst. I think she's actually pretty cool. She's Minardi's sister and catches wind that Isaac is the guy responsible for her death. So now she's not so much driven to see the lighthouses get lit for her village, she just wants to see Isaac fail and to suffer. So Taurus had a cool design and a cool boss theme and a cool boss fight, but neither him or Minardi had much going on for them in the first game besides, woo, look at us, we're the bad guys, woo, you know? Like, Agatio is just kind of here to flex his muscle and to keep Karst in check, but I actually felt kind of bad for her, you know? Like, her sister was trying to save her village, and she was killed because of it. You know, she's a villain with a personal motive, and I respect it. And man, that moment when you fight the 2 dragons in the Mars Lighthouse, and you see that these 2 dragons are using the same synergy as Agatio and Karst, that was an oh shit moment if I ever had one. Because yeah, Agatio and Karst were here, they were sent here to light the lighthouse, they couldn't do it, and they were somehow transformed into dragons, and you kill them. You actually get to talk to them before they die, you could even read their last thoughts, and they're just trying to stay alive so they could at least witness the lighthouse get relit before they die. That is insane. Oh, but here's another take for you. So, I actually like the dynamic between Felix, Jenna, Sheba, and Piers more than I do with the party from the first game. Now, Isaac and Co are fine, but they're pretty bog standard. Like, there's not really a whole lot to these characters, I find. But in the Lost Stage, for one, the majority of these characters were introduced in the first game, so I kind of felt like as if there was a bit of mystery to them, you know, like there's an appeal to learn more about these characters, and we actually get to do so. And again, in fairness, you know, they do put these characters to good use. You know, we get to see that Jenna is a bit of a hothead, and Sheba doesn't take shit from no one, and then when Pierce gets introduced, he's a noble warrior from a faraway land who's also a bit of a fish out of water. This game even has a number of character building moments, like Sheba teasing Jenna about her crush on Isaac, or the party pressuring Pierce to confess how old he really is, or Pierce grieving over his mother who died while he was away. Like, I love this kind of stuff, and it's something I feel that the first game would have greatly benefited from. Oh, and of course, you can't talk about Golden Sun characters without bringing up Kraden. He's probably one of the most hated characters in the series. If not, then he's the most hated character, because all he ever does is run his trap and blabber on and on about shit that most people just don't care about. However, I'm going to fill all of you in on a little secret. So come here real quick. Yeah, just a little closer. Yeah, perfect, right there. So Kraden is a goddamn king. Now, before you even say anything, I want you guys to stop and think about this for a minute. Think about everything that Felix and Jenna went through as Satoris and Minority from the first game. Who was there with them? Kraden. Think about all the times where you're climbing mountains or sailing the ocean or navigating difficult terrain. Who's there with you? Kraden. Kraden isn't some bitch baby boy who just sits at a pub all day and waits for your party to come back from doing all the dangerous shit. No, Kraden is right there, right behind you. He's got your back. Now, it's true that he doesn't help out in battles, but it's not like as if he gets in the way either. Now, I get it. He's annoying, but fuck, he's earned that right. Try rock climbing when you get to be that old. Try having as much energy to do something that you're passionate about when you're that old. Try doing anything when you're that old. Kraden is out there exploring the world. He's getting it. He's doing what he wants to do. He's doing what he loves. He's doing more than what you and I will ever do in our lifetime, and he's an old-ass fucking man. I ain't gonna tolerate any more slander towards my man. He is untouchable. Don't fight me on that. Another criticism that people have with the story is how it doesn't seem to have a lot of focus, which I think is pretty fair. There's a guy on YouTube who I really enjoy, a gentleman that goes by Casp, who made 2 great videos on the GBA Golden Sun games. In his Lost Age video, he says that the theme of the first Golden Sun game was failure. You're failing to save Jenna, Felix, and Kraden, failing to stop the 2 lighthouses from being lit. This is something that I 100% agree with. That point is driven home with how tightly designed the game is. You're never in one area for too long because you're chasing after Felix's party. You don't have a lot of time to stop and smell the roses. It's important to remember that for the majority of the first game, Jenna, Felix, and Kraden were stuck with Satoris and Minority. Towards the end of the game, Sheba gets roped in as well, but they were always one step ahead of Isaac and his crew. In the Lost Age, they don't have to worry about Satoris and Minority anymore. They're free. Those 2 were the ones putting the pressure on the kids, and now that pressure isn't there. They get thrown to this huge world, and now they can go seemingly anywhere. They still have their mission, yes, but this is the first time in a long time they actually get a chance to breathe. So while it's true that the plot of the Lost Age isn't focused, I'd argue maybe that's kind of the point. If the first game was about failure, then maybe the second game is about freedom. Just some food for thought. So yeah, those are my complicated thoughts on the story of the Lost Age. The story in the first game was fine. Again, it was inoffensive, it got the job done. The story in the Lost Age is much more interesting to talk about, for better and for worse, but I think it's safe to say that for that reason alone, I prefer the story in this game than the first. Again, it's far from perfect, and I really do think that whoever writes the script for these games seriously needs to dial it back with the dialogue. But at the end of the day, it's a game where you discover lost civilizations, and you fight dragons, and you explore the world by sea and air. I may have my problems with the Lost Age. I got a lot of problems with the Lost Age. But man, this game fucking rules. I still prefer the first game, believe it or not. I think the first game is much easier to revisit, and it feels a lot better to play, in my opinion. The Lost Age is a much meatier game that I'm not always going to be in the mood for, and there's also a lot of shitty bits that keep me from coming back as often as the first game. But the funny thing is that a lot of the issues that I have with the Lost Age can easily be fixed if Nintendo and Camelot had just had the cojones to remake these games. The first game took me about 15 hours to beat 100% completed. This game took me about 25 hours to complete, and the only thing I missed was a summon tablet back in Ayers Rock. That's a solid 40 hours right there, which I think is a good length for an RPG. Now, if we got a remake of Golden Sun that was true to Camelot's vision, where after we defeat the Fusion Dragon, set sail for Lemuria, it smoothly transitioned into the Lost Age. If it gave us control over the random encounters like in Bravely Default, or if they gave us maps for every town and every dungeon in the game, and if they gave us a fast travel system early on, that would be it for me. That would be my favorite JRPG ever made. It would have the strong beginning, the satisfying ending, the tight world design, the challenging bosses, so much side content and post-game content, that would be it for me, and I would never ask Nintendo for anything ever again. Man, a man can dream, right? But alas, Camelot took a bit of a break after this game, and deservedly so. You make 2 giant epic JRPGs on the handheld, you're gonna feel a bit burnt out, and that's what happened. So they took some time and they made some of the Mario sports games because, hey, they had fun making those games. And they made some more, They made some more, but Golden Sun didn't leave their minds. No, Hideyuki Takahashi actually even said that the events of the first 2 games were just the beginning of what they had in store, and this led fans to speculate where the story could go from here. And for years, they waited. Camelot, however, started to get a bit too comfortable making these Mario sports games, and as a result, Golden Sun fans started to get frustrated. Camelot teased that they had more in store for Golden Sun, but they had nothing to show. Fans were left in the dark for far too long until one day, dawn broke. And what a dark dawn it was.